The last stand above Meridian Prime, the bridge of the UNS Defiant. Hope smelled like recycled air and coffee that had been reheated too many times. Captain Sarah Chen stood at the viewport, hands clasped behind her back, watching the blue, green marble of Meridian Prime rotate slowly beneath them. Somewhere down there, in the southern continent's farming district, her daughter Maya was probably finishing breakfast before school. The thought made Sarah's chest tighten, but she kept her face neutral. Captains didn't get to show fear, especially not when 47 souls depended on her to keep them alive. The Defiant Hope wasn't much to look at. She was a colony transport, refitted with outdated defensive systems, more cargo hauler than warship. Her hull showed the scars of 15 years, hauling supplies between Earth's outer colonies. The crew called her the rust bucket with affection. The kind of love you give to something that keeps working long after it should have quit. Sarah had commanded her for 8 years, and in all that time, they had never seen real combat, escort duty, pirate scares that turned out to be false alarms, and one memorable incident with a malfunctioning communications satellite that nearly started a diplomatic incident. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb appeared at her elbow, datapad in hand. He was a broad-shouldered man from the Europa stations, with permanently grease-stained fingers and a habit of humming old Earth songs when he worked. Morning readings are stable, Captain. Though I'm still seeing that fluctuation in the starboard coolant system. Nothing critical, but it's there. Sarah nodded without taking her eyes off the planet. Keep monitoring it. How's the crew? Tired. We've been at elevated alert for 3 days straight. Marcus paused, then added quietly. They're wondering when the relief ships will arrive. So am I, Sarah admitted. The United Nations Space Command had promised reinforcements. After the Krillian Empire started making aggressive moves in this sector. That was 2 weeks ago. The Defiant Hope and her crew were alone, the only thing between Meridian Prime's 8 million colonists and whatever was coming. Lieutenant James Park called from the sensor station, his voice cutting through the bridge's low murmur. Captain, we've got multiple contacts emerging from FTL. Bearing 270, distance 400,000 kilometers and closing. Sarah's stomach dropped, but her voice remained steady. How many? Park's fingers flew across his console. The color drained from his face. 70. 3 ships, Captain. Destroyer class and above. Flagship signatures consistent with Krillian Imperial Navy. They're in formation. Battle formation. The bridge went silent, except for the soft beeping of instruments. 70. 3 warships. The Defiant Hope had crew quarters for 50 people, and weapons systems that were already obsolete when they were installed. Sarah felt every eye on the bridge turn toward her. Sound general quarters, she said calmly. All hands to battle stations. Helm. Put us between those ships and the planet. Communications. Get me a direct line to Meridian Prime's governor. Tell them to begin emergency evacuation protocols. The alarm klaxons began their wailing song throughout the ship. Sarah moved to her command chair and sat down, fingers drumming once against the armrest before going still. Through the viewport, she could see the Krillian fleet taking shape. Dozens of angular vessels, bristling with weapons that could turn the Defiant Hope into debris in seconds. Ensign Lisa Kowalski, barely 23 and fresh from academy training, manned the communication station with shaking hands. Captain, the Krillian flagship is hailing us. They're demanding we open a channel. Put it through. The main screen flickered and resolved into the image of a Krillian commander. The aliens were bipedal, but distinctly non-human, with elongated skulls, multiple eyes arranged in a vertical line down their faces, and skin that shifted through shades of gray and purple, depending on their emotional state. This one's skin was deep violet, the color of controlled aggression. Behind him, Sarah could see the pristine bridge of a ship that probably cost more than her entire vessel. Human vessel. The Krillian's voice came through the translator with perfect clarity, though something mechanical and cold in the rendering. I am Supreme, Commander Velshera of the Krillian 9th Fleet. You are in violation of territorial boundaries claimed by the Krillian Empire. The world you defend is now Imperial property. You will power down your weapons, disable your engines, and prepare to be boarded. You have 30 seconds to comply. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. Supreme Commander, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Nations ship Defiant Hope. Meridian Prime is a registered human colony under the protection of Earth's government. We don't recognize your territorial claims. I'm asking you to withdraw your fleet and allow diplomatic channels to resolve this peacefully. Velshera's skin rippled, darkening to almost black. Your government is not here, Captain. Your reinforcements are not here. You are one aging transport ship against the might of an empire. There is no scenario in which you survive this encounter, unless you surrender. I am being generous by offering you this choice. 30 seconds. The count has already begun. The transmission cut off. The bridge of the Defiant Hope erupted into controlled chaos as crew members called out readings and prepared systems that everyone knew wouldn't be enough. Sarah's mind raced through scenarios, tactics, possibilities. Every simulation came back the same way. Total destruction in under 2 minutes of engagement. Marcus Webb moved to stand beside her chair, his voice low. Captain, we can't fight that fleet. We've got 2 plasma cannons that were obsolete before you were born. Point defense systems that might take out a few missiles before they're overwhelmed. And hull plating that was designed to deflect micrometeorites, not military-grade weapons. I know, Sarah said softly. The escape pods can hold everyone. We could evacuate, let them take the ship. Live to fight another day. Sarah turned to look at him. And what happens to the 8 million people on Meridian Prime? The moment we're gone, that fleet moves into orbit and starts occupying the planet. You've seen the intelligence reports on Krillian occupation zones. They don't negotiate. They don't share. They take everything and leave populations to starve if they resist. Marcus's jaw tightened. So what do we do? Before Sarah could answer, Lieutenant Park called out. Captain, Krillian fleet is adjusting formation. They're surrounding us. 20 seconds until their deadline expires. Sarah stood up and walked to the viewport. Down below, Meridian Prime continued its rotation, completely unaware that in the next few minutes, its fate would be decided. She thought of Maya, her daughter who wanted to be a biologist, who collected rocks from the riverbeds and insisted on keeping a journal of every species of bird she spotted. She thought of the millions of other children down there. Families sitting down to meals, farmers tending crops, teachers preparing lessons, all of them living ordinary lives that were about to end unless someone did something. She turned back to her crew. Every face showed fear, but also determination. These were people who had volunteered for frontier duty, who had left Earth's safety to help build something new among the stars. They knew the risks. They accepted them. "Listen to me," Sarah said, her voice carrying across the bridge. "In 10 seconds, that fleet is going to open fire. We can't outrun them. We can't outfight them. But we can do one thing they won't expect. We can make them pay such a heavy price for this system that they'll think twice before threatening another human world." Park looked up from his console, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You want to ram them. Not just ram them. Our reactor is still running at full capacity. Marcus, if we overload the core, disable the safeties, and set it to go critical on impact, what's our yield?" Marcus's eyes went wide. He pulled up calculations on his datapad, fingers moving frantically. "Jesus, Captain. If we strip every safety protocol, vent all the coolant, and let it go supercritical at the moment of impact with something large enough, we're looking at an explosion equivalent to maybe 40 megatons. That's enough to vaporize anything within 10 kilometers and cause catastrophic damage to anything within 50. Which ships are closest to us?" Lieutenant Park highlighted the tactical display. 3 destroyers in close formation, and their flagship is only 30 kilometers behind them. "If you're thinking what I think you're thinking, Captain, you could take out a significant portion of their forward line." Sarah's hands were steady as she gripped the back of her command chair. "Helm, plot a course directly toward that flagship. Maximum burn. Engineering. I need you to start overriding reactor safeties on my mark. Communications. Send a message to Meridian Prime. Tell them what we're about to do. Tell them to prepare for debris falling from orbit, but that they'll have time to evacuate the impact zones. Tell them." She paused, her voice catching for just a moment. "Tell them that the Defiant Hope stood her ground." Ensign Kowalski's voice shook as she replied. "Message sent, Captain. Governor Harrison is acknowledging. He says they'll remember." The countdown on the main screen showed 5 seconds remaining. Sarah could see the Krillian ships beginning to charge weapons, energy signatures building across their hulls, like fireflies lighting up in the darkness. "Captain," Marcus said quietly, "there are escape pods. Some of us could still make it out before impact." Sarah shook her head. "No one leaves. We do this together, or not at all. I won't order anyone to stay, but I'm asking you as friends, as family. Will you stand with me?" The responses came immediately, overlapping, from every station on the bridge. "Yes, Captain. We're with you. Let's make them remember this day." The countdown hit 0. The Krillian flagship's weapons went hot, dozens of targeting lasers painting the Defiant Hope's hull. Sarah sat down in her command chair, one last time, and smiled. It was a fierce smile. The smile of someone who had made their choice and would not look back. All hands, this is the captain. Brace for acceleration. Engineering. Override all reactor safeties now. Helm, take us in. Full burn. Let's show them what humans do when we're backed into a corner. The Defiant Hope's engines. Ignited with power they were never designed to sustain. The old ship groaned and shuddered as every ounce of thrust was channeled into forward momentum. Through the viewport, the Krillian flagship grew larger, its weapons beginning to fire, energy beams cutting through space toward them. Marcus Webb stood at his station, fingers dancing across controls, watching reactor temperatures climb into the red, then beyond, into ranges that should have been impossible. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Coolant systems failed. Containment fields began to buckle. The ship was tearing itself apart around them, but it was moving faster than it ever had. Building velocity, building momentum, building an unstoppable force of human defiance. Lieutenant Park called out impact calculations. 30 seconds to collision. Krillian destroyers attempting to intercept. Point defense is engaging. Plasma fire from the Defiant. Hope's meager weapons reached out, not trying to destroy the enemy ships, but simply to clear a path. One destroyer took a direct hit to its engines and spun away, disabled. Another tried to move into their path, but was too slow. The Defiant Hope screamed past it, close enough that the two hulls almost touched. Flagship in range. Park shouted over the noise of failing systems. They're trying to turn. They're too big. They can't maneuver fast enough. Sarah gripped her armrests and thought one last time of her daughter, of the life Maya would live, of the future that would exist because of what happened in these final seconds. Marcus, give me everything. Every reactor. Every power cell. Every ounce of energy left in this ship. Already done, Captain. Marcus replied, and there was peace in his voice. It's been an honor. The bridge lights flickered and died as every system channeled power to the engines and the overloading reactor. In the darkness, illuminated only by the glow of instrument panels and the approaching bulk of the enemy flagship, the crew of the Defiant Hope held their positions. Through the viewport, Sarah could see individual details on the Krillian ship now. Windows, weapons turrets, the graceful curve of their hull. And then they saw her crew. Humans standing at their stations, faces visible in their own viewports. The moment of recognition as they realized what was about to happen. From Meridian Prime, Sarah whispered, "The Defiant Hope. Moving at velocities that should have torn her apart. Her reactor achieving temperatures that should have been impossible. Struck the Krillian flagship dead center, in its command section. There was no sound in the vacuum of space. But if there had been, it would have been the sound of breaking stars. Metal screamed. Energy screamed. And then there was only light. The reactor core went supercritical, at the moment of maximum penetration. 40 megatons of explosive force, released in a fraction of a second, vaporizing both ships instantly. The shockwave expanded outward at relativistic speeds, a sphere of annihilation that caught the three closest Krillian destroyers and crushed them like insects. Secondary explosions rippled through the fleet as debris moving at orbital velocities tore through shields and hulls. Ships that, weren't destroyed outright, were crippled, tumbling, bleeding atmosphere, and crew into the void. On the bridge of one of the surviving Krillian cruisers, Supreme, Commander Velshara's second, in command, stared at the expanding cloud of plasma and debris, where the flagship had been seconds before. His skin had gone pale white, the color of absolute shock. Around him, bridge crew were shouting reports, damage assessments, casualty figures that kept climbing. They destroyed themselves, someone whispered. The humans destroyed their own ship. The second, in command's hand, shook as he reached for the communication system. All ships cease fire. All ships begin emergency withdrawal. We are leaving this system immediately. But Commander, our orders were to occupy the planet. Supreme Commander Velshara is dead, along with 4,000 crew and 7 ships destroyed or disabled. By one human transport, the second, in command's voice cracked. Send a priority message to Imperial Command. Tell them that humanity is not like the other species we've conquered. Tell them that humans don't surrender. They turn themselves into weapons. Recommend immediate reassessment of all human contact protocols. We are withdrawing. Now. The Krillian fleet began its retreat, leaving behind debris, bodies, and the scattered remains of the ship that had refused to bow. Down on Meridian Prime, 8 million colonists emerged from shelters and looked up at the sky, where the light of the explosion was just becoming visible. A new star that burned for a few seconds before fading. They didn't know yet what had happened. They didn't know the names of the 47 people who had just saved their world. But they would learn. They would remember. And they would tell the story of the defiant hope to their children and their children's children, until the tale spread across every human world in the galaxy. The age of human surrender was over. The age of human defiance had just begun. And somewhere in the wreckage, spinning through the void in a damaged escape pod that had been automatically ejected during the final seconds, Chief Engineer Marcus Webb's emergency beacon began to pulse, a tiny signal in the darkness, carrying with it the recorded last moments of the Defiant Hope's crew. A testament to what 47 ordinary people had done when faced with the impossible choice between submission and sacrifice. When humanity becomes the weapon, the escape pod tumbled through space like a leaf caught in a hurricane, spinning end over end through a debris field that had once been ships, crews, and certainties about how wars were supposed to be fought. Inside the cramped metal coffin, Chief Engineer Marcus Webb floated unconscious, strapped to an acceleration couch that had saved his life, even as it cracked 3 of his ribs. Blood from a scalp wound had formed perfect spheres in the zero gravity, drifting like tiny red planets in the recycled air. The pod's emergency systems had kicked in automatically during the Defiant Hope's final seconds, launching him into the void against his will, robbing him of the death he had chosen alongside his captain and crew. The pod's distress beacon pulsed steadily, a heartbeat in the darkness, broadcasting on all frequencies that Marcus Webb was alive and alone among the dead. Its power cells would last for 72 hours. After that, the cold would come, then the silence, then nothing at all. Marcus didn't know any of this yet. He floated in the peaceful darkness of unconsciousness, dreaming of the moment the Defiant Hope had begun her final burn, of Captain Sarah Chen's fierce smile, of the way the bridge crew had answered her call without hesitation. 300,000 kilometers away, on the retreating Krillian cruiser Velkorthan, sub. Commander Thelrain stood in what had been Supreme Commander Velshera's ready room, staring at tactical displays that made no sense according to everything the Krillian Empire knew about warfare. 7 ships destroyed, 4 more damaged beyond immediate repair. Over 6,000 crew members dead or missing. The human colony world still intact below them. And all of it caused by a single outdated transport vessel with weapons systems that shouldn't have posed a threat to a modern military corvette, let alone a battle fleet. Sub. Commander, we're detecting a distress beacon. A sensor officer reported from the doorway. Human signature. It's coming from the debris field near the impact site. Thelrain's skin shifted to a thoughtful gray. Survivors. Appears to be a single escape pod. Standard emergency configuration. Life signs are weak but present. Every instinct told Thelrain to ignore the signal, to let the human die in the cold, to erase this embarrassment from existence. But he had not risen to his position through blind adherence to instinct. He had survived by understanding that intelligence was as valuable as firepower. And right now, the Krillian Empire needed to understand what had just happened. Dispatch a recovery team, he ordered. I want that human alive and conscious. We need to know how they made that decision. We need to understand their thinking. The sensor officer's skin rippled with confusion. You want to save the enemy? I want to understand the enemy. Thelrain corrected. There's a difference. The human destroyed themselves rather than surrender. That's not normal behavior. That's not rational behavior by any standard military doctrine. We need to know if it was madness, desperation, or something else entirely. 2 hours later, Marcus Webb woke up screaming. Pain lanced through his chest with every breath. His head felt like someone was driving spikes through his skull from the inside. But he was alive, and that realization brought not relief but overwhelming grief. He had failed. The escape pod had betrayed him, stolen his choice, left him breathing, when he should have died with his crew, with his captain, with the only family that had ever truly understood him. The human is conscious, a mechanical voice announced in accented English. Marcus's vision cleared slowly, revealing walls that were definitely not human construction, air that smelled wrong, and standing at the edge of his vision, a Krillian medical technician with instruments that looked more like weapons than healing tools.
Where am I?
Marcus's voice came out as a croak. Aboard the Velkorthan. The technician replied, its skin a neutral beige that suggested clinical detachment. You were recovered from an escape pod 3 hours ago. Your injuries have been stabilized. Sub. Commander Thelrain wishes to speak with you. Marcus tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, as his broken ribs sent fresh waves of agony through his torso. The Defiant Hope. My crew. Did anyone else make it? The technician's silence was answer enough. Marcus closed his eyes and felt something break inside him that had nothing to do with his physical injuries. Captain Chen. Lieutenant Park. Ensign Kowalski with her nervous smile. All of them gone, vaporized in the moment of impact. Scattered atoms mixing with the remains of the Krillian flagship. He had survived. They had not. The universe had made a mistake, and Marcus Webb was the evidence. Sub. Commander. Thelrain entered the medical bay, with the careful movements of someone approaching something dangerous. He studied Marcus with all four of his vertical eyes, skin shifting through shades of gray as he processed what he was seeing. A human, ordinary in every measurable way. No enhanced modifications. No combat augmentations. Just a middle-aged engineer with grease, stained hands and sorrow carved into every line of his face. Chief Engineer Webb. Thelrain said, his English flawless through the translator. I am Sub-Commander Thelrain. I have questions. I'm sure you do, Marcus replied bitterly. Let me save you some time. Yes, we knew it was suicide. Yes, we did it anyway. No, we weren't insane. We were protecting our people. That's what humans do. Thelrain's skin darkened to a troubled purple. You misunderstand. I don't question your loyalty or your courage. I question your reasoning. Your ship was outmatched. Your weapons were obsolete. Your chances of survival were zero. By every rational calculation, surrender was the logical choice. You would have lived. Your crew would have lived. You could have been exchanged in prisoner negotiations, returned to your families. Marcus laughed, and it hurt his ribs, but he didn't care. You think we didn't know that? You think Captain Chen didn't run those calculations 1,000 times in her head? We knew exactly what we were giving up, but you made one mistake in your own calculations. Sub-Commander. You forgot to factor in what surrender would have cost us. Your lives would have been spared. Our lives, Marcus repeated, pushing himself up despite the pain. Meeting the alien's multiple eyes, with a stare that made Thelrain take an involuntary step backward. But not our families. Not the 8 million people on Meridian Prime, who would have faced Krillian occupation. We've seen the reports from your conquered worlds. We know what happens to populations that resist. Starvation. Forced labor. Entire generations crushed under the weight of an empire that takes everything and gives nothing back. Those populations chose resistance, Thelrain argued. If they had accepted integration peacefully. There is no peaceful integration when one side has all the weapons and the other has no choice. Marcus interrupted. You're trying to rationalize what we did, trying to fit it into your understanding of acceptable behavior. But here's what you need to understand, Sub-Commander. Humans don't surrender when the cost of surrender is higher than the cost of death. Captain Chen had a daughter on that planet. Maya, 12 years old, wanted to be a biologist. The captain had a choice: live as a prisoner and watch her daughter grow up under occupation, or die free and give that daughter a chance at a real future. She chose her daughter's freedom over her own life. We all did. Thelrain was silent for a long moment. His skin shifted through colors Marcus didn't recognize, emotions that had no human equivalent. Finally, he spoke, and his voice was quieter, almost wondering. In all our centuries of expansion, we have never encountered a species that weaponizes their own mortality. It's not brave. It's not even logical. It's terrifying. Good Marcus said flatly. Maybe you'll think twice before threatening another human world. The Empire has already issued new directives. Thelrain admitted. All human contact is to be approached with extreme caution. Your species has been reclassified from Level 3 threat to Level 1. The same classification we reserve for the Zenith Collective and the Void Walkers. Civilizations that have existed for millennia and command technologies we barely understand. You accomplished this with one destroyed transport ship. Marcus felt no satisfaction in this news, only emptiness. How many of your people died? 6,340. 7. Thelrain replied. Including Supreme Commander Velshera, one of our finest strategic minds. The flagship Carvelith, pride of the Ninth Fleet. 3 destroyers. And 4 more ships damaged so severely, they'll require years of repairs. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and meant it. Not for stopping your invasion, but for the lives lost. Those were people too. Families. Friends. They were following orders, same as we were. This seemed to surprise Thelrain more than anything else. You apologize. After what we intended to do to your world. I apologize because I'm human, Marcus explained. We can hate what someone does and still recognize their humanity. Or, in your case, their personhood. The soldiers on that flagship didn't make the choice to invade. Your commanders did. Your empire did. But every death diminishes us all, even enemy deaths. Captain Chen understood that. She didn't want to kill anyone. She wanted to save everyone. But when forced to choose between protecting her people and sparing yours, she chose her people. That's not hatred. That's duty. Thelrain sat down slowly in a chair that adjusted to his alien physiology. Your captain's final transmission was recorded before the impact. It was brief. Would you like to hear it? Marcus's throat tightened. Yes. The sub-commander activated a data crystal. Captain Sarah Chen. Chen's voice filled the medical bay, calm and clear despite the alarms screaming in the background. To anyone listening, this is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Nations ship Defiant Hope. In approximately 30 seconds, my ship will impact the Krillian flagship in a last attempt to protect Meridian Prime. I want it known that this was my decision, and mine alone. My crew followed my orders because they trusted me, because they believed in the mission, and because they understood what was at stake. We are not heroes. We are ordinary people who were asked to make an impossible choice. We chose our children over ourselves. We chose the future over the present. If you're hearing this, it means we succeeded. Tell our families we love them. Tell them we died free. Tell them that the Defiant Hope lived up to her name. Chen Outdao. Silence filled the room after the recording ended. Marcus was crying. Tears floating in the low gravity. Each one carrying the weight of 40. 7 lives that should have had decades more to live. He didn't bother wiping them away. There was no shame in mourning the best people he had ever known. What will happen to me now? Marcus asked when he could speak again. You'll be returned to human space, Thelrain said. Along with this recording, the tactical data from our engagement, and a message from what remains of the Ninth Fleet Command. The message is simple. Humanity is not to be threatened lightly. Any future interactions must be negotiated through proper diplomatic channels. The age of forceful expansion into human territory is over, Da. One ship did that. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. One crew that refused to accept the inevitable. Thelrain corrected. You changed the equation. Before the Defiant Hope, we calculated human resistance in terms of weapons, ships, and military capacity. We factored in loss ratios, resource expenditure, and acceptable casualties. What we didn't factor in was that humans will turn themselves into weapons when all other options are exhausted. That's not a variable we can plan for. That's not a risk we can accept. 3 days later, a human patrol ship picked up Marcus Webb's beacon in neutral space, right where the Krillians had left him, in a fully stocked lifeboat, with enough supplies to last a month. The patrol ship's captain was Commander Richard Harrison, and he had questions that Marcus answered slowly, carefully, each word feeling like he was carving epitaphs into stone. They brought him back to Meridian Prime, where the planet's governor was Sarah Chen's brother-in-law, where her daughter Maya waited at the spaceport with eyes that had already cried themselves dry. Marcus knelt in front of the 12-year-old girl and told her that her mother had died a hero, that the whole crew had died as heroes, that they had saved millions, including her, and that their last thoughts had been of the people they loved. Maya hugged him and whispered, "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for telling me." The memorial service was held a week later in Meridian Prime's capital city. 8 million people paused at exactly noon to observe 2 minutes of silence for the 47 crew members of the Defiant Hope. Flags flew at half-mast. Schools taught special lessons about sacrifice and duty. And in the central plaza, they unveiled a monument. A simple stone column with 47 names carved into its surface, topped with a bronze sculpture of a ship rising toward the stars. The inscription at the base read, "They stood between the darkness and the light. They chose the light." Marcus stood at the memorial with the families of his crew, with the survivors of a world that almost wasn't. And he finally understood what Captain Chen had known in those final seconds. They hadn't died in vain. They had bought time, bought safety, bought a future for millions of people who would never know their names, but would benefit from their sacrifice. Every day they lived free. The story spread. From Meridian Prime to Earth, to every human colony in known space, the tale of the Defiant Hope became legend. New recruits at military academies studied the engagement, not for tactics, but for the psychology behind the decision. Engineers examined the technical data, learning how the crew had overridden every safety system to turn their ship into a weapon. Historians debated whether it was suicide or sacrifice, until a consensus emerged it was neither. It was choice. The most fundamental human right exercised in the most extreme circumstance. The Krillian Empire kept its word. Borders were respected. Diplomatic channels opened. Trade agreements were negotiated with a level of respect that humans had never received before from the older galactic powers. And whenever negotiations grew tense, whenever the Krillians or other species began to issue ultimatums, human diplomats would simply place a data crystal on the table, containing the Defiant Hope's final transmission. The message was clear: push humans too far, and they won't retreat. They won't surrender. They'll turn their final breath into a weapon and make you regret every choice that brought you to that moment. 5 years after the incident, Marcus Webb retired from active service and became a teacher at the Colonial Engineering Academy. He taught young engineers how to maintain fusion reactors, how to optimize power systems, and how to make impossible repairs with limited resources. But his most popular lecture was the one he gave once a year, on the anniversary of the Defiant Hope's last flight. He would stand in front of a room full of cadets and tell them the truth, that heroes weren't special. They weren't superhuman. They were ordinary people who, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, chose to act according to their values, rather than their fears. He told them about Captain Chen's love for her daughter, about Lieutenant Park's terrible jokes, about Ensign Kowalski's nervousness and her courage, about a crew that sang together, even as their ship was dying around them. And he would end every lecture the same way. The Krillians thought they were facing one damaged transport ship. They were wrong. They were facing the accumulated weight of every human value, every human love, every human refusal to bow. That's what we are. That's what we've always been. We're the species that looked at the impossible and said, "Watch me." The Defiant Hope proved that. 47 ordinary people became extraordinary because they refused to let fear make their decisions for them. Remember that when your own impossible moment comes, because it will come. And when it does, I hope you'll have the courage to stand as they stood, to choose as they chose, to be as defiantly, impossibly human as they were. The cadets would leave his lecture in silence, thinking about sacrifice and duty, and the terrible beauty of people who chose others over themselves. Some would cry. Others would enlist in combat services they had previously avoided. All of them would remember. And somewhere in the vast darkness of space, in the debris field that had never been fully cleared, particles of the Defiant Hope still orbited Meridian Prime, like a protective ring. 47 souls scattered into atoms, but never truly gone, watching over the world they had died to protect. The legend lived. The sacrifice mattered. And humanity learned the lesson that Captain Sarah Chen had taught the galaxy with her last act, that sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to lose, no matter the cost. The stars remembered. The children of Meridian Prime remembered. And every species that ever considered threatening a human world remembered that somewhere in the human psyche was a line that, when crossed, transformed ordinary transport crews into weapons of mass destruction, driven by love, duty, and an absolute refusal to surrender. The Defiant Hope had earned her name, and humanity had earned its reputation. In the end, that was all that mattered.